First, Mr. President, I'd like to associate myself with every word of Senator Sanders' remarks, which were, as always, incredibly thoughtful. So, too, I would like to thank Senator Bailey for the compliment, which I pray I can live up to. In some respects, this is a very sad day. As a former prosecutor, I never dreamt that I would ever stand in support of legislation like this, because I never wished to believe that legislation like this would be necessary. You see, I was a prosecutor in the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. I worked for Robert Morgenthau, who I continue to believe is the gold standard for prosecutors. But I've become increasingly troubled over the years since then that they just don't make them like Robert Morgenthau anymore. And I listened to my colleague, Senator Kaminsky, who I have tremendous respect for, also a former prosecutor. And as Senator Bailey said, if everyone treated the work the way I'm sure Senator Kaminsky did, as I know him, we would not even need to discuss this legislation. And I think Senator Kaminsky's mistake is that he believes that everyone does it the right way. And the truth of the matter is, 99% of the prosecutors in this state do. Senator Kaminsky gave us a number of improper prosecutions that have occurred. I forget what that number was, but my point is this. One miscarriage of justice is too much, too many, when we're dealing with people's life and liberty. And no one ought to be above the law, especially, quite frankly, our prosecutors. Because nowhere is the old power of the king and the queen and the pharaoh and the dictator still in existence when it comes to prosecutors' offices. Nowhere is the power of the state more likely to be abused than in the office of prosecutors. And why? Because they have the power over your freedom. They can take everything you have away from you. And we have the best system on earth, no doubt, but every so often, someone comes along and abuses the system. My colleagues in this chamber, you know that I threw every ounce of my fiber into the raise the age debate last year. I did so because I believe to my core that we have an opportunity with young people that we might not have later on. And I listened to the debate, and I heard time and time again from my colleagues across the aisle that our system is corrupt, that it is inherently abusive, that there are people, especially people of color, who are not treated fairly in our system, and that there are human beings in jail who don't belong in jail. And that only happens, by the way, through prosecutorial misconduct. It's the only way an innocent person ultimately ends up in jail. Prosecutorial misconduct. Now, again, there are very few cases like that, but one is too many. And I listened to Senator Kaminsky, and if the things that he said about this bill were true in terms of what it would do to prosecutors, I would be disturbed, and I could not support it. All we're saying here is that when you assume the awesome power as a prosecutor in this state, that you need to apply the laws of the land fairly and without discrimination and without prejudice. And by the way, if you do your job properly the way you ought to, and the way the majority of prosecutors do, you have nothing to be worried about and nothing to be concerned about. This will do nothing to prevent you from doing justice. But as Senator DeFrancisco said, it will send a message to those who might otherwise be tempted to do the political thing or the prejudicial thing or the discriminatory thing, and perhaps this legislation will prevent that from happening. And so to Senator DeFrancisco, I thank you. Again, for me, it is sad that I am standing here talking about the need for this legislation, but I think in today's day and age, with the craziness that surrounds us, with the hyper-politicalization, that the day has come. Mr. President, I'm in support of this legislation.